Here we are at the second bench where Mitchell Canyon Road crosses Red Road. Right behind the bench is a stand of coyote bush and mugwort. The mugwort is shorter and has a big, jagged leaf.
It's one of the ones that has a very strong odor. Oftentimes, you can learn a lot from a plant by its old English name. Wort just meant plant. Mugs, though, they were little itchies, little mites and fleas. So mugwort kept away mites and fleas. And it does work. You can make a dog collar out of mugwort. It was said to give you good dreams. If you stuffed your pillow full of mugwort, you'd dream about the person you were going to marry. But I suspect some of the good dreams were caused by an absence of fleas, thanks to the strong smell.
Then there's the coyote bush, which has small elliptical leaves and can grow up to 12 feet tall. It's also called coyote brush.
Coyote brush is one of the shrubs here that's really taken for granted. It's always there. It's pretty nondescript until the fall. It's adapted to our Mediterranean climate. It actually flowers in the fall, just before our rainy season. And it turns out that there are separate male and female coyote brush. They're dioecious. And the male plants get little gold flowers that look like crowns, and the female plants get fluffy white flowers, which is probably how coyote brush got its name. Looks like a little piece of coyote fur that's been ripped off.
Ken calls this particular stand of coyote bush senescent.
Once it gets past a certain age, like some of us, it has great difficulty. It starts to put out more wood.
Okay.
Fewer leaves, as if encouraging a fire, encouraging itself to burn.
These shrubs likely took root after a major fire in 1977.
Old-timers here still speak of that great fire, the fire of 1977, and it actually started close to here. It started naturally. It was a lightning strike, August 1st, 1977, right about dinner time at Twin Peaks, which is just to the east here of Mitchell Canyon. There had been 2 years of drought, it's never a good sign for a fire, and the first thing it did was to burn through the Coulter pine forest. The Coulter pines were suffering from a beetle blight at that time, brought on by the years of drought. So they caught fire immediately. And Coulter pine, you have gigantic pine cones. And one of the rangers trying to fight that fire the first night reported that these huge pine cones went bouncing down the hillside on fire, exploding like hand grenades when they hit the bottom and hit rocks. The fire burned up Back Canyon and Donner Canyon rapidly. It burned around North Peak, burned up the Waterfalls Canyon, Wild Oak Canyon, burned down to Green Ranch on the other side of the mountain, and then started down Mitchell Canyon. Well, Mitchell Canyon had actually burned 30 years before. The damage wasn't quite intense. But all in all, the fire burned for 3 days and 3 nights and consumed 6,000 acres here on Mount Diablo. Immediately after, people were devastated. The wife of the then publisher of the Contra Costa Times, Margaret Lesher, began a campaign to collect funds to reseed Mount Diablo. And they collected several $1,000s to replant Mount Diablo with Monterey pine trees. Well, of course, Mount Diablo reseeded itself just fine. The money was used to start the Fire Interpretive Trail, now called the Mary Bowerman Trail, around the top of the mountain. Right after the fire, we saw many plants that are fire followers. There was beautiful populations of fire poppies for several springs after the fire. Now they're gone. There's seeds lying dormant until the next fire. And there's populations of Fremont's bush mallow just hanging on 30 years after that fire.
The most lasting damage from the 1977 blaze was from bulldozers going back and forth across the creek. They ripped up the creek bed, making it impossible for a native strain of rainbow trout to navigate.
And beginning in the late 1980s, the fish are thought to have disappeared. None could be found in any of the pools higher up in the creek.
Now we're headed up the trail to check out a Coulter pine and a gray pine that apparently escaped the blaze. Keep a lookout for what Ken calls a glory hole on your right.
This dates from the 1860s, from the great copper mine era. And the miners would come in here looking for quartz veins because copper was usually associated with quartz. And they'd find a promising spot and they'd get their picks and shovels going and they'd dig in for several feet. And if they didn't find quartz, well, they'd give up and walk away. But the remnants are still here after all these years, called glory holes.
Stop 10 is just ahead on your right.